106.8 broadcast where we serve justice, love mercy.
And walk humbly.
Yes, we do. I am Brady Labe, and I'm joined today by my co-host Jackson Parnell. Say hi, Jackson.
Hello, everybody.
How's everyone doing today? It's currently November 15th on a Friday. TGIF, am I right? Let's hope everyone have an excited Friday. We're going to be moving on into some very interesting stories today. First, we're going to be covering some EPA regulation rules that are being finalized right now and exactly what they're going to do. And then we're going to move on into a case of the EPA and DOJ announcing it was a lawsuit or not even a lawsuit. They were penalizing a certain company for an excessive amount of emissions, and we're going to be talking about why that's relevant. But as we normally do here, we will be going over the MICA news. So very quickly, the real-time U.S. EPA particulate matter 2.5 reader is putting the air quality at a 15, which is considered satisfactory, and air pollution poses little to no risk. And on the MICA events coming up, this Sunday, the 17th at 5 p.m. is going to be the community meal at the Village Coffee House in Sulphur. It's going to be from 5 to 7. And then this Thursday is going to be the Community Voices meeting in the Calcasieu Public Library at 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. So that's going to be what we have going on this week. All right. So we're going to quickly move on to our first story. This was an article. Do you remember what this article was from, Jackson? It was from CBS News. So that is where we are getting our information for all of the facts that we're quoting on this. So a final rule by the Biden administration is causing companies to pay a federal fee if they emit a certain amount of methane. This is something that we've touched briefly on in previous episodes before. But the EPA rule follows on a directive from Congress that's was included in the 2022 climate law, and it was introduced with the intention to allow, or rather incentivize, companies to adopt better practices and reduce methane emissions, which is the primary component of natural gas, is methane. As we've spoken about frequently on the show here before, methane emissions are particularly dangerous or bad rather for the environment because they have a super warming component to them. That methane warms significantly more than carbon does, so it creates those short-term effects way worse. And it also accounts for 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions in general. So it's a pretty crucial component in reducing climate change in the near future. The rule itself is set to be announced Tuesday at an international climate conference in Azerbaijan. At the same time that all this is happening, it is important to note that President-elect Donald Trump is naming the former New York Congressman Lee Zeldin to the head of, it says in the article, it just said the agency. Do you know specifically what agency it was talking about, Jackson?
I do think it is the EPA.
Okay, I didn't know. In the article I tried to find it, it just said the agency. But if that pick is confirmed by the Senate, Zeldin is going to be he's expected to loosen or reverse dozens of environmental regulations approved that have already been approved under President Biden. Trump also being likely to target the methane fee that we're discussing because he has already promised to deregulate oil and gas industry on the record. So there is a little bit of pushback from some parties on the rule overall. In terms of what the rule is actually doing, the fees right now by 2026 are expected to go up to $1,500 per extra ton release. So that's by 2026. These rules, like we said, are likely going to be challenged mostly by industry. And they will not be finalized until next year. But hopefully the idea behind the fee, not only in, reducing emissions, but is to incentivize deploying new technology that would help reduce methane emissions and other harmful air pollutants. Um, the industry groups in Republican-led states challenged the rule that we're speaking about, but they did not avail. Uh, they argued their position was that the EPA was overstepping its boundaries with rules that are impossible to follow. Uh, quickly, when I was reading this, I wanted to say this. Aside from the factual stuff that is being presented right now, uh, if the rule if these rules are impossible to follow, then that's going to be very bad news for the state of humanity. I just don't. I would like to specifically take time to point out this objection, because if it is the case that it is genuinely impossible to follow a very trivial reduction in methane emissions, if that's going to be difficult, then we're never going to be able to solve a full scale climate issue.
Yeah. Adding on to that, the article had mentioned at some point that like a majority of the largest oil and gas producers already meet the qualifications of these fees.
Yeah, I have that
Like
written down too.
and I think it just goes to show that, or how entrenched these industries like have put themselves in seats of power, and their relations to governments, mostly through lobbying. Uh, it it goes to show that even this this fee process for the methane emissions, it's still a pretty big deal. It's a great victory for climate justice, but it's clearly not enough to solve the problems that we have. And even such like small a fix as this uh is being responded to with uh lobbying the president-elect himself to undo these minuscule changes. It's just proof of how unwilling to unseat themselves from power these industries are, even whenever it's demonstrable that their industry practices are burning the globe like to a crisp.
Yeah, essentially. I think that is also important to note because to contextualize these types of even small victories, or maybe just to take a step back to understand that even these small victories, in the face of the challenges that we are seeing in climate change, like you said, Jackson, these are not actually changes that are going to make the impacts that we need. And then we go a step further and we say, okay, so these things aren't enough. So not and then there are people claiming that it's radical to enforce these kind of emissions or reductions of emissions because it's too much, but it's already not enough. So the policies that are getting through that aren't enough are getting pushed back, like Jackson said, by
Yeah,
lobbying.
that's what I was getting.
Yeah, it was
That
what you
we're
said.
getting breadcrumbs, and they're
Yeah,
complaining about the
they're
breadcrumbs.
saying, hey, no, these breadcrumbs suck. It's like, dude, like come on, just at least let us have even crumbs. So we should be, I mean, I guess we just say that just to completely contextualize exactly what is the sort of absurdity that's going on in the type and pushback of this kind of thing. Um, but actually, I did one final thing to I got from the article was that assuming that the rule goes through, it will cumulatively reduce emissions by 1.2 million metric tons of methane, which is equivalent to taking nearly 8 million gas-powered cars off the road for a year. That seems like it is a good fair bit. So I don't actually know in the context of how much emissions we put out, but just these types of regulations are the direction that we need to be heading in, and seeing the pushback that is likely to continue and be exacerbated in the future. Um, well, that's not good, just to say the least. But
It's setting up a bit of a rock and a hard place scenario. The
yeah,
rock being the end of the world, and the hard
yeah,
place being the
or at least the end of millions of of third world country.
Yeah, climate instability
Yeah.
in virtually all regions.
Yes. This
It'd be
is
great.
we need to start making some protests or something. All right, but we'll move on to a related story. Actually, it is pretty related. So this a company. It's called, I don't know how to, Oventive.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? It's an
Hmm.
oil and gas giant. Um, so they were dodging some clean air laws, and they ended up having to pay for it. Um, so the EPA and DOJ uh, basically caught this company releasing a lot of VOCs, which is volatile organic compounds. Um, they were producing way more than they were supposed to. So the settlement includes a 5.5 million civil penalty fine and requires the company take actions expected to exceed 10 million that are projected to reduce over 10 or 2,000 tons of the VOC and 50,000 tons of harmful pollutants each year. So they're essentially being forced to take measures taking measures to reduce these harmful pollutants. The article, I forgot to mention, by the way, this article is by thecooldown.com. It's from The Cool Down. Yeah, TCD, The Cool Down. It mentions specifically in the article why the settlement is important. Um, and I think this is pretty straightforward. Is that it reinforces that pollution from these oil and gas operations aren't going to be tolerated because it's illegal and because it kills people. Uh, so that is, I mean, definitely a good thing to see from the EPA and DOJ to crack down on stuff like this because it does show other oil and gas giants that this type of pollution is not going to be tolerated. And then it goes on to list a lot of the things that we at Micah 6 already know, being residents of sulfur, the VOCs, which we also have VOCs in sulfur as well. They can lead to asthma, and respiratory illnesses, and then of course methane. We did an episode on that. That doesn't directly affect you, but it's essentially just not good overall, which is what the article kind of gets into. Um, and then there's this one. Let me cover. Do I need to cover this last part?
No, you
No,
should be good.
not really. It was just a kind of a short little part about exactly what was going down with that company, which I wanted to cover because it's cool that they
Mm.
are getting fined for doing that. All right, but I think that's all we have lined up for today, unless you have anything else, Jackson.
Um, Not really. I mean, uh, the second article, the cool down one, uh, is just I guess we sort of mainly covered it to be like a sort of an example of the actions we need to take against these companies, but to sort of expand on it further, I feel like, at least personally, these sort of financial penalties that these companies are receiving is not really enough. I feel seeing these it ties back to the whole breadcrumbs thing
Yeah,
we were mentioning that it is really nice to see things like this happening, but again, it's not enough.
yeah. It's not enough pushback to actually in the grand scheme of the reason why we're doing it to
Yeah.
protect people is it's not actually protecting people to the degree that it needs to. So it does. We do need to properly criticize these institutions as well for not doing enough.
Hmm. That's
But
all I really wanted to add.
yeah, that was a good addition. All right, but I think we're gonna leave it off here. We'll see you guys Monday, and I hope everyone has a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.